Okay, I want to talk in this session about improving the performance of your records through cleaning. When most people think about improving the performance, they think in terms of removing the big clicks and pops that you sometimes hear in vinyl replay. But actually those are the kind of really large bits of dirt that cause those. Most of the kind of performance degradation of a dirty record is caused by very small dirt in the record, which kind of results in a haziness, grain, murkiness to the sound, that it's not a kind of really pure, lifelike, sparkling, dynamic sound that you know is achievable from a good record surface. So when most people think about improving their vinyl replay, they kind of think in terms of let's get a better turntable or tone arm or cartridge or whatever it may be. But actually you can get significant improvements just by increasing the way that your stylus tracks through the grooves, by improving the surface of the record itself. And I think that to best explain this, it's kind of good to look at a skiing analogy. For those skiers among you, you'll understand this perfectly. That when a skier is going down a slope, particularly a steep mogul field, which is where the snow has a lot of humps and things that the skiers need to negotiate their way around, a skier will be going from side to side and also up and down constantly. The skiing motion is kind of like this, and it's a very quick motion. The skis have to slide really cleanly through the snow, and a massive amount of research. I mean, the ski industry has spent literally millions of pounds researching skis so that they dynamically slide through the snow with the least friction and the fastest possible way around the corners and so on. So they invest in the actual shape of the ski, but they also look at things like the surface, the running surfaces of the skis, and to reduce drag they put special wax, and the wax varies on the snow conditions. It's quite a complex area, and if anyone's interested, just look up skiing wax on Google, because it's the ratio. They reduce the friction by changing the ratio of the water to the dry friction aspect, and you get what you call stiction on skis as they go through snow. But enough said really on that. I mean, basically you can reduce the friction of your stylus as it negotiates the groove by treating the surface of the record. Not an easy subject, and I'm not going to go there because it's actually so complex that I'd rather not deal with it. But enough to say that when your stylus is going through the grooves, it's got to track those grooves and slide very cleanly. So the way that the surface of the record is treated in a microscopic way will affect the slide of the stylus. Low friction is important because it reduces static electricity. The build-up of static on a stylus can definitely affect the magnetic coils of the cartridge quite high up. It can also affect the mechanical movement of the stylus as it's wending its way through the grooves. So reducing static is one important aspect, but there's also another, and that is that the way in which the record is treated affects the glide, or the friction of the actual stylus as it negotiates its way through the grooves. So you can improve performance by using the right kind of fluid, because the right kind of fluid actually affects the friction of the walls, and it also attracts in water vapour. Now water vapour, this is where I didn't want to get too deep into the mechanics of how you reduce friction on the stylus, but water vapour does reduce the friction of the stylus in some way as it goes through the grooves. It's just a clue really as to what happens. We're talking about such microscopic levels that it's easy enough to look at your stylus when it's sort of sitting sedately in the groove. You think you can't see it moving. It appears that nothing's going on, it's just gliding through a groove of vinyl. But actually there is a massive amount going on. At a microscopic level, we're talking here about the stylus detecting anything in its path down to 0.1 of a micron and responding to it. 0.1 of a micron is 750 times less than the thickness of a human hair. So that is the levels that we're dealing with. It's absolutely minute. That is then amplified 8,000 times up. So at this kind of microscopic world, you can imagine that the slightest little bit of dust, or a series of bits of dust, is like throwing grit in front of a downhill skier going at 90 miles an hour. These skis are going to get a bit upset by that sort of, approach. The force on your stylus is measured in 8 tons per square inch. It's what it's hitting the side walls at. And it's also melting them to 500 degrees Fahrenheit temperature, which is momentarily melting the vinyl. You can only begin to imagine that this business of having a little bit of dust in the groove doesn't hurt. Actually does hurt a great deal. You don't see the dust, it's at such a microscopic level. We're not talking here about the big bits of fluff and the dust you can see with your naked eye. Think about it, you can't even see the vinyl stylus moving. You cannot see that stylus move and vibrate as it goes through the grooves. You can't see the dust that's affecting it either. So let's try and have a bit of faith that actually cleaning records can affect performance a great deal more than most people imagine. At Origin Live, we've been cleaning records for many years and are familiar with the conventional wisdom on the subject. However, recently we've come across information which will do 4 things. The first is it will dramatically improve the sound of your records regardless of what system you've used to clean them before. Secondly, it'll increase the life of your stylus by up to 6 times, which, if you're buying, say, a £500 cartridge, instead of it lasting a year, this means it's going to last 6 years, which, allowing for exchange, is probably saving you around at least £4,000. Thirdly, this information will preserve the life of your records massively. In other words, the dynamics and life of your records is going to go on a lot longer. You're not going to suffer the effects of worn records, clicks, pops, all that sort of stuff. And fourthly, it will enable you to quickly assess the limitations and capabilities of the various machines on the market and cleaning systems, because there is a big difference in the performance of the different cleaning systems, which, unless you know this information, you just won't be aware of. When we think about how to clean your records, we can kind of break it down into 5 main strategies that are commonly used. The first one is that you can do absolutely nothing to clean your records and just hope for the best. The second strategy is to take your record and either use a microfiber cloth or a brush to just run over the surface of the record and take off the fluff and any kind of obvious dust and stuff that's on there, like so. This is, by the way, is easier done when the platter is just rotating on the record. That's what most people do, and then just gradually sort of wave it off to the side so you get rid of all the dust. Okay, third method is to simply allow the stylus needle of your cartridge to drag its way through the grooves, and that is going to pick up a certain amount of debris and rubbish, and then providing you keep your stylus needle clean, then your records will stay clean. The advocates of that particular strategy say so because actually when you brush your records, you can actually simply be brushing the debris deeper into the grooves, and it doesn't actually necessarily take some of the kind of deeper stuff out. It'll get rid of the surface fluff and the rest, but not the deep stuff. The fourth strategy is that people will take their records over to the kitchen sink, get some warm water and detergent, give them a good scrub, and then hang them out to dry. Not being a particular fan of washing up, that has never really appealed to me, I have to say, and it can also damage your records, so be very careful of that particular strategy. The last one is that people will use a professional record cleaning machine, and that would be something like the Keith Monk's machine, which is interestingly is the first record cleaning machine ever produced and is still the best, equalled or followed closely by the Loricraft, which is a very similar copy and was built with the permission of Keith Monk's, who's sadly no longer with us. So there are kind of various grades of record cleaning machines, which we'll go into in much more depth a bit later. The videos start off at a fairly superficial level, but bear with it because you are almost certainly going to learn something later on, and we just have to go through the foundational stages really, so that people who are completely new to the subject will actually understand what we move on to later. I think before looking at information of this kind, it's really important to know the sources and where it's come from. So I just want to give credit at this point to the various authorities who have shared with me, and the authority could not really be much higher. The first person I want to talk about is Martina Schroeder. Martina has been 7 times award winner in the Absolute Sound magazine for her cleaning fluids. That's among many other accolades. Martina has studied chemistry, which, as we will see later on, is really important in this area. She's also worked solid in a record cleaning archive library for 6 months, which has given her an incredible level of experience. The second person would be Terry O'Sullivan, who is the director of Loricraft, and they make some of the most respected cleaning machines in the world. Third person is Jonathan Monks, the son of Keith Monks, who made the first record cleaning machine ever produced, and which is still, interestingly, the best or equal best with the Loricraft. These machines inhabit many of the leading archive libraries in the world. And lastly, John Burns, who imports Dynavector cartridges into the UK. John was previously employed by Lynn and has looked at innumerable styluses under a microscope. He really knows a lot about cartridges and is going to be contributing and shedding light in a very relevant way on this subject. Okay, so we've talked about why it's a good idea to clean your records. What I'd like to talk about before we get into the kind of real detail of how to clean your records is to think about how the damage actually occurs, because a good understanding of why the records actually do wear is really helpful in terms of understanding the correct solution. I always think Einstein was right when he said if he had an hour to save the world, he'd spend the first 59 minutes looking at the problem and then 1 minute on the solution. So first of all, how does record wear occur? And basically, if you think of the stylus needle tracking down the vinyl, it's running at forces that are measured in tons per square inch, which is colossal. It's so high a force that it actually melts the vinyl momentarily as it runs down that groove. Now you can imagine that under those kind of pressures that stuff will get readily embedded onto the diamond stylus itself. When that occurs, the diamond, instead of being a nice shiny, clean, gleaming, clear diamond like you're used to in the jeweller's shops, becomes more like a lump of jagged coal and is highly abrasive. That kind of abrasive needle is now ploughing through your precious record grooves, which are very soft. I mean, vinyl is not a hard material, and it does it irreparable damage. So that's the first thing to really understand. Keeping dirt out of the grooves is the most important thing, and keeping your stylus clean is also very important. So we'll get on to that in a minute, and we'll look at the various ways that we can, and strategies to keep records clean. Surface contamination on your records. When we look at the microscopic world of the surface of your record, it may look clean if you've vacuumed it off with a dust extractor or vacuum cleaner or whatever. And even if you look at it through a microscope, it will still look clean. However, that doesn't mean that it is clean. And what we're going to look at now is the kind of gungy substances that can actually be in the grooves of your record player and which affect the glide of your cartridge as it's tracking down through the grooves. As we've kind of gone over before, you only need the slightest bit of drag or increased friction on your stylus, and it is going to affect the sound quality. So what we're going to look at now is how to remove all the kind of substances which will probably not occur to many people that are on the surface of your records. I want to credit this next information to Martina Schroeder, who spent quite a bit of time with me really just talking about how she first got into record cleaning. Martina studied chemistry, but in the course of her career she spent 6 months solid in an archiving professional library cleaning records so that they could archive them. And in that time she must have come across records from every possible imaginable source. And as a trained chemist, she could sort out what was actually on the records, what the contamination was, what the correct substance was to then clean that particular contamination. So she has tremendous experience in this area. And some of the things that she found are the sort of things, as I've said before, which most of us would not really consider as a problem, but it's still in the surface of your records and we need to deal with it. So if we can start on the list, and there's a lot to say really on this list, but I'm going to keep it as brief as possible. We all know about dust. You only have to wipe your finger across a bookshelf after it's been left for 2 months and it's obvious that's what's in the atmosphere. It's coming down all the time. Less obvious perhaps is if someone's got dandruff, they might just sort of scratch their head over the record, it all goes on. Same with skin cells, they're falling off your skin all the time. Less obvious perhaps is the liquid deposits that get on records by human contamination. And I was quite surprised to learn that saliva is a major cause of this, and I'm not talking about people dribbling on the records. We're talking here about if a person sneezes or has got a bad cough and they're constantly putting out saliva vapour into the atmosphere, that will settle on your records. If someone's been drinking beer and coughs, same thing, beer will be on the surface of the records. An obvious one is finger marks. The grease on your fingers is there naturally, but there's also, if people have been handling food, or it could be anything, that will get onto the surface of your records if people handle them badly. The nicotine, tar deposits, if your records come from a household where there's been smokers, then there'll be a fair amount of nicotine deposited on the surface of your records. The last two contenders for contamination are non-human. The first is minerals in the water supply. We all know limescale build-up is a problem in some areas of the country because you've got calcium or lime deposits in the water. If records have been washed with non-distilled water, then when the water evaporates, then you'll get the mineral deposits left on the surface of the record. Very small, admittedly, but records were washed fairly regularly in many discos to reduce the clicks and pops that were on them. So it really depends whether your record's been washed with water, whether this is a problem or not. And lastly, which is a problem on all records, is mould release agent. We're going to talk quite a lot more about mould release agent later on, because it is a major source of contamination and we need to get rid of it. Okay, so the next thing to look at after we've got our heads around the fact that the stylus damages the grooves as it goes down is how to actually keep dust and debris and all the things that contaminate the record off the record. Okay, this is a little bit more subtle than meets the eye. The dust does not get on a record primarily just as it's rotating on your record player and it's kind of falling out of the atmosphere onto the record. The main way that dust gets onto your records is primarily by static. And static acts like a kind of, it makes your record kind of like a magnet for all the dust available either in the atmosphere or on your platter mat. So if we can somehow get rid of static, actually let's just explain the mechanism first. When we get our record out of its sleeve, okay, it's a brand new record, take it out of its sleeve, that puts a big charge on the actual record surface itself, and I can actually feel it on the hairs on my hands are actually attracted to the record. So you can imagine what's going on when you put this thing onto your platter. Now if it's a felt platter mat, then it's likely to have, I don't know, days and days of impregnated dust on that surface. So it'll suck up all that dust straight onto the surface of the record. When you then go to put your record back in its sleeve, it's got all that dust on it, so the dust then goes into the sleeve, and every time you put that in, more and more dust gets into the sleeve. It may be microscopic, and it probably isn't, you know, visible even, but it's there nonetheless, and it's how your records tend to get contaminated. Okay, so a couple of strategies that we can use to minimise dust getting onto the record. First of all, instead of using a felt platter mat, you can use something like this, which is actually an award-winning composite platter mat that we use. Not only does it improve the sound of the records enormously, but it also is much harder for the dust to actually settle on and get kind of impregnated. It's basically, you can just brush this with your hand, or a brush or anything, just to get the dust off, because it's a relatively solid surface. Okay, so that's the first way you can actually reduce the amount of dust that's going to get onto your record. The second one is that the normal neoprene belts that run most turntables actually build up quite a high static charge on the actual platters themselves, and people have noticed static on platters to varying degrees. This is a very nice little solution. It's a belt that we know reduces static on record players massively. I say that because we used to use neoprene belts on our platters and had significant static problems on occasions. This belt solved those problems, so that's why we know that's a very, very good way of reducing static. Not only does it reduce static, but it's actually going to improve the sound quality again, because unlike neoprene, this is a much more damped material, and without going into all the technicalities of why, it just sounds a lot better. We do these on a money-back guarantee as well, so if you don't immediately recognise that there's a sound improvement over a normal belt, then we'll just refund you your money. Okay, the next strategy to look at is how to reduce the actual static charge on your records. And this is where I think a good understanding of how static works really helps. One, to try and get water vapour into the atmosphere, because static doesn't like water vapour for some reason. Let's not go into why, but it just doesn't like it. So pot plants are a great way of reducing static in a room, because they give off a bit of moisture and that helps. You don't have to go to a humidifier. So if we can find something that can reduce the dryness on a record, it's going to help immensely. Now this is going to be a very controversial subject I'm going to talk about now, and no doubt I'll have a lot of people who disagree with this, but just bear with me for a little while, please. The surface of the record has actually got a microscopically thin, invisible layer of this stuff called mould release agent on it. Mould release agent is a kind of waxy, oily substance. Now, if you know anything about oil, it's a water repellent. I mean, in my days as a student, and when my car wouldn't start because it was, there's a bit of damp or it was cold, it would invariably be because there's moisture on the spark plug leads. So what you'd do is you'd spray on WD-40, which of course is a thin oil, and that would repel all the moisture from the lead so that it would conduct much more electricity, and lo and behold the engine would start. So if you've got a nice oily substance all over your record, it's going to be a great water repellent, which means you're going to have much more likelihood of static building up on the surface of the record. So if we can first of all remove the mould release agent, it will really help in terms of reducing the static on the record. Okay, so if we just think now about how to make the record surface anti-static, there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is with something called the zap gun, I believe, which is a kind of red handled device which you point like a gun at your record surface. I haven't got one with me, but you just kind of click it and it puts an anti-static charge onto the surface of the record. And the other is to actually make the surface of the record anti-static using a fluid. I want to talk a little bit about fluids, because fluids are probably the most important element of record cleaning, and there are various ideas about fluids. Some of them are not good by well-meaning people who probably don't know the ins and outs of them. Martina is brilliant. She's spent years formulating these fluids, has done endless tests on them, and she's the person behind this fluid which we recommend for cleaning records. And I'd just like to kind of share some of the thoughts that she gave me really when we were having a long chat about record cleaning machines and fluids. A good fluid will do three main things. First of all, it's going to clean the mould release agent off the surface of the record. You really don't want that. Secondly, it's not going to damage the record in the process of doing that. And thirdly, it'll actually help anti-static on the record, and it'll help the stylus to glide through the grooves more easily. So if we take each of these in turn, not causing damage to the surface of the record is a biggie. There are fluids that do it, and like Fairy Liquid is a washing up detergent is a classic. If you start scrubbing your car, your nice shiny new car, with washing up detergent, you'll notice after a few times that the paint has started to go a bit dull. My concern, and it's not proved, is that it does etch. There's stuff in washing up detergent that has quite kind of nasty properties that will damage vinyl potentially, and if isopropanol can do it, it's highly likely that washing up detergent will be have the same effect. Isopropanol isn't quite so serious, because basically that seems to actually bond somehow with the actual vinyl, and it can be washed out, because the difference between, if you've been washing your records for instance with isopropanol and then you use this, it'll actually reverse the effects of the isopropanol, because although it cleans the record, isopropanol somehow does something nasty to the surface of the vinyl. I'm not a chemist, so I can't give you a full explanation of that, but this is just the observations of people who actually listen to the two side by side, and there is a difference. The second thing is it reduces anti-static on the surface. This formulation is actually based on an optical fluid, and so whatever deposit it does leave, if it even leaves a deposit on the surface of the record, is microscopically thin. We're not talking here about kind of something that will get gunged up on your stylus. We're talking about something which basically just repels attracts water vapour into the grooves, and that will help reduce the static. But it also possibly helps the actual needle to glide its way more easily through the grooves. Liquid cleaning. The only way to clean a record is by chemically breaking down all these kind of toxic deposits that we've been talking about, getting them into solution, which can then be kind of violently sucked off with the force of a mini tornado. And this is where the good record cleaning machines sort of separate themselves from what I've described as kind of a bit questionable designs, because the suction needed to extract this solution needs to act very, very quickly on the fluid. You can get what's described as a kind of ultra-fast evaporation, which is where fluids are sucked off, but the deposits in them, the things which were in solution, are left behind, just because it's like a very quick evaporation or a distillation, so you don't actually get rid of the muck. You have to get rid of it very quickly, very forcefully, and that's where this sort of focused suction, things like the Loricraft machines, are just so good. Moving on again to the solutions, there are many home brews on the market and which address quite a few of the issues we discussed. But I really want to say that there are other things to consider besides just getting this mess into solution and then just sucking it off. The first of these is, does it harm the surface of the record? There are certain solutions which do harm the surface of the record. Isopropanol is one. The chemist will tell you that it does attack polyacetate, which comprises 20% of your record. It may not do a great deal of damage because it takes a long time to act, but it's nonetheless still there, and it doesn't do anything for the sound of records, that's for sure. Okay, so what we want to move on to now is how to actually clean our records. By the way, the fluid which we were talking about earlier, the Loricraft fluid, is fantastic value for money. I mean, this will actually make 5 litres or a gallon of fluid. So for £32 bargain, really, that might go up in 5 years' time. So at the time of this video, it's £32. Right, if we start at the kind of most basic level, there are differences in the types of machine, in both convenience of use and also in the actual performance and the amount of cleanliness they produce on the record. There are big differences, say, between this machine, which is an £80 machine, certainly an awful lot better than doing nothing, and say something like the £3,500 Keith Monk's machine. So what I'm going to do now is try and go over the differences between the various machines. And so let's start off at the bottom rung, so to speak, which is a fairly straightforward concept. Brilliant little device, this. What you do is you put your fluid into this, which is a bath, basically. Okay, it's a bath of fluid. It's painted bright yellow so you can see all the debris getting deposited onto the bottom of the trough, so to speak. There's some brushes here which kind of brush the record as it goes through the fluid. So you simply put your record in and rotate it. It's going through the fluid, getting cleaned by the brushes as it goes round. Oh, by the way, please don't take these as kind of instructions. All I'm doing here is demonstrating principles and talking about the principles of the bath. There are a lot of detailed instructions that go along with this particular kit, and I'm not going to go through them now because it's no point really. So let's just think about this. First of all, the mould release agent is getting dissolved into the fluid. Depends what fluid you're using. I can't vouch for the fluid that actually comes with the record with the spin clean machine. I'm actually going to be using this fluid myself because I know it's reliable. So the mould release agent's getting dissolved into the fluid. That immediately, to my mind, causes a problem. It's a bit like if you put a red sock in your washing machine. The dye from that red sock can just contaminate the entire wash, and all your white shirts come out a slightly pink colour. Okay, so that's the most obvious thing. You're talking about an oily residue from the record getting into this solution, and guess what? It's going to float on the surface because oil floats on water. And so when you withdraw your record, it's going to have that deposit on the surface. Now, I'm not, this is a great value machine, and I'm not knocking it for that at all. I'm just saying that there is a difference between the very high-end machines, which don't do this, and the cheaper machines. Okay, so, but I mean, still, you're going to get a much better result than if you hadn't done this process. So don't get me wrong, it's a really good way. If you can't afford the Rolls Royce, go for one of these. So you've got contamination of the actual cleaning solution. I'm not sure about the recommendation here to dry off the fluid. Personally, I'll probably just leave it to air dry. Not as quick, obviously, but it will dry in time. The cloths, which you wipe them, will slowly get contaminated, and so obviously there's another cause of contamination creeping in there. Although you will see debris dropping to the bottom with this device, and that's great, yeah, it does clean records. There is still contamination, soluble contamination in the actual solution. So when you put your next record in, it's going to pick up the same contamination, unless you're changing your fluid every single wash. The other thing you're going to also need to clean, of course, is the brushes in here, because they are constantly running over the surface of the record. I think that just about covers this machine. So just to summarise, all you're going to do is they recommend three rotations of the record in one direction, some more turns in the other direction, bring it out, dry it, and there you go, clean record. Okay, there are various camps when it comes to record cleaning machines, and another kind of variant of the spin it in a bath machine is what's called the ultrasonic cleaning machines. And again, they're quite a lot bulkier than this, and they look very fancy. But the principle is that basically you've got your record in a bath like this, and it rotates around. The bath is ultrasonically agitated, which then removes the dirt which is in the grooves, and it all falls to the bottom of the bath. It is better than this machine, and it's certainly fully automated, so it's a lot less hassle, and I believe it dries the record as well. The only drawback here is that it's not what I would describe as the ultimate cleaning method, for the simple reason that the mould release agent remains in the solution, and although the solution is filtered, okay, they do filter the solution, the fact that mould release agent is soluble means that it won't get cleaned out necessarily by the filters, and so it can just come back and recontaminate the next records that go through the machine. That would be my only concern with that particular model. Okay, so we're going to step up to the next level after the spin clean machines. This is the moth cleaning machine. Comes in at £450, which is not bad. It's quite a lot more automated than the spin clean, and a lot less trouble, a lot quicker to actually do your record cleaning with. So what we'll do is just kind of look at the principles here first of all. There are very similar principles shared here with many other cleaning machines on the market that have this basic philosophy. So I'll kind of try and explain the strengths and weaknesses of the machine, and when you look at any other cleaning machines that you might be considering, you'll kind of spot the similarities and what it will do and what it won't do. First of all, we've got a vacuum strip here with a couple of velvet strips either side to kind of increase the suction over a very narrow area. This is here really so that when we've got the record all kind of wetted out and all the dirt has been agitated into a fluid solution, what we'll do is you turn the record over and this sucks it dry. It sucks all the muck and the debris out of the record with a good level of force. It's the only way of really getting a record clean, and it's been proved that when you look at these things with a microscope that it actually does lift all the dirt and debris and muck out of the record. It also dissolves the mold release agent, providing you're using the right cleaning fluid. And the great thing is that you're using fresh cleaning fluid on every record, so that you're not recontaminating the next record, as is the weakness with the spin clean machine. In this case, the fluid, which is all filled with mold release and debris, gets sucked down this tube into a tank in the base of the machine, and then the whole tank later on is just drained off with this tap into waste. The Lard de Son cleaning fluid is actually biodegradable, so it's very environmentally friendly. You don't have to have any special places to get rid of the contamination. Okay, so I think we're just about ready to do our dem now. I've got the planets, the Holtz, the planets here. So the first thing we do is we put the record onto the machine, just clamp it tight, and then set it in motion. This machine goes forwards and backwards, which is actually quite a strength apparently with these things, because it means that you can actually not only clean the grooves from the front, so to speak, the leading edge, but also you get onto the back edges of all the little grooves in the record. So you can see here, just make sure there's plenty of fluid on, because the brush action is not actually the action which takes the debris out of the grooves. In fact, the fibres of the brush will not actually go very deep into the grooves at all. So all we're relying on here is to get the muck into a solution. Okay, we'll just reverse the direction now. This is the normal way a record goes. Just allow it to do about 3 turns of the recommended amount. Okay, so this has now hopefully got most of the kind of contamination and debris and all the rest off the record and into the fluid. A word of advice here from the manufacturer of this particular machine is that some records, if they're really dirty, need more than one coat of fluid. It's actually best to do the job twice. But this is something that really is so dependent on the record itself. Most records don't need that, and we're just talking about ones which are really, really mucky. Okay, so we'll stop that there. Remove the record. Turn it over. And this time, the sucker, which we've been talking about earlier, will be turned on, and it will suck all of that fluid off the record, which will both dry the record and get rid of all the contamination. On some machines, this is a very noisy operation, and that is the one big drawback of them. It's worth being well aware of this. It's not something you could do in front of the television or while having a family conversation. It's like the vacuum cleaner, and personally I don't enjoy the noise of loud vacuum cleaners. Okay, so first of all we set the vacuum cleaner going. I can even talk over this, so this gives you some idea. I'm talking quite loudly. If you want to feel wary of the fenders, that's one policy or earplugs. Okay, well, that should have done the job, so let's just have a quick look at the underside of our record. There we go, absolutely dry, beautifully clean. Now I can't actually see the marks left by the felt strips over the kind of vacuum part of this. But there will probably be a little bit of contamination where that has been left, where I just lifted the record off. It'll be very, very minor, but it's still there and something to be aware of. Okay, so as we know, this can get contaminated over a period of time, and I think after about 10 records, you do start to notice a slight kind of build-up of fluff along these edges. So what you can do is just swing this off sideways, remove it, and give this a really good clean. Okay, that just about does it. Okay, well, we finally arrived at what I describe as the Rolls-Royce of machines here. In between the moth machine and this, there are a lot of different variations really. Some machines are a lot quieter than the moth, they're also more automated, so there's quite a variety of them. There are only 2 machines in the world built in this particular method and using this particular way of getting the records clean. So I just want to talk about the Loricraft here. The other machine is the Keith Monk's machine, which is used by archive libraries and collections in the world. Loricraft are also a professional machine. Very similar, but they do have slight kind of twists and variations. The Keith Monk's machine is more automated. In other words, it keeps the cleaning fluid in a little tank which is actually built into the record player itself. And it puts the fluid onto the record, brushes it, and sucks it all off. Fully automated, the whole thing, the whole process is basically completely done for you. Obviously, there's a premium to be paid for that sort of thing. There are some slight advantages of doing it the Loricraft way. They would argue really that one is that the cleaning fluid is fresh every time it's mixed up. You can get slow degradation over time if a cleaning fluid is left in a tank. Probably not a problem if you're an archive collection and using it on a weekly basis. But for the Loricraft, they would say, yeah, you're using fresh fluid. Secondly, you can vary the type of fluid that you actually put onto the record. There may be some specific types of solvent you want to use for specific types of contamination. It is known. I'm not a great expert on this at this stage, so we'll just pass that by. But there are, needless to say, there are actually advantages of being able to choose your solvent. Okay, so just to explain the principle of the machine. What we're going to do is put fluid onto the surface of the record, agitate it just as before as with the moth cleaning machine using a brush. This machine actually goes at quite a fast rotation, as you'll see, so you get a much higher level of agitation. Once the fluid has kind of dissolved and got all the debris into solution, we suck it off with this fella here, which is a vacuum pump attached through a tube here and going into quite a small fine area at the end. But that creates like a mini tornado at the point of suction and basically sucks all the debris out. And there's no brush to leave contamination on the record, so it's a very clean way of actually extracting the fluid. It's also got the added advantage of being very quiet. You'll hear the suction pump when it does go on. The fluid is collected in this bottle here when it's been sucked off, and in totality this is really the ultimate in terms of no contamination being left on the record. It's a quiet machine to use, it's very pleasurable, it's easy, and so I think it's probably about time that we made a start. So let's just get the record turning first of all, which we can do in both directions as per the moth. And what we'll start off by doing is just putting on the fluid onto the surface of the record. The manufacturers recommend it's safer to go for a lot of fluid than the other way around, because again, the way this is working is that the brushes are not actually getting into the grooves very deep, but the fluid is being agitated, and that is what is getting into the grooves, and it's taking everything up into solution. as you can see, there's quite a lot of suds developing on the surface here. We now reverse the direction, and the reason for that is that, as you can imagine, all these grooves have kind of undulations going on through them, and that creates like a little wind shadow or a shadow, like a rock in a stream, for the fluid. So you want to clean both sides of the undulation, and that's why it's really good. All the best machines will reverse the direction of the record just to make sure that you're really getting at both sides. Okay, we're ready for the suction now. So what we do is we put the direction into forward, put the pump on. As you can hear, it's not too noisy. You can hear my voice quite easily above that. We suck the first inch of the width of the record, at which point we reverse the direction, and starting at the inside, the manufacturers put an incredible level of research and development into this, and this machine has taken, well, actually took many years to develop to the state that it is now. So although this might seem kind of quite intricate in terms of its methodology, it's really simple once you get your head around it, and it's there for a reason. As you can see, it's quite quick. About a minute aside is what you can get this time down to if you're quick and not necessarily talking over it all the time. It'll go right the way to the outside of the record now, and once that is done, the entire record is absolutely immaculately clean. Just while we're waiting for it to get to the end, the thing that keeps it just off the surface of the record is a very thin thread. That thread is continuously clean because it's actually rotated through here and then sucked into the tube here. Okay, well, we're just about there now. So that's it. Job done. Well, thank you very much for watching these videos. I hope you've enjoyed them and learned a bit from them as well. In conclusion, we need to think about what's the best way forward, because I expect that if you haven't got a decent record cleaning system in place already, you're probably wondering how much you should invest in one. And I would really recommend here that it is well worthwhile investing in a good record cleaning system. Just the fluid alone makes a phenomenal difference. I wouldn't recommend anything apart from L'Art du Son fluid. Some people will probably think it's completely mad that I should be so hard and fast on a type of fluid. But I've heard the difference that it makes, and if you're cleaning your records with something like isopropanol, forget it. You are not even close to what you could get out of your records. The difference between a record that's been cleaned with just a normal solution and something that's been cleaned with L'Art du Son is staggering. It's so audible, even on a half decent system. So that's the first thing. The fluid is probably the most important thing in whatever you choose. So I can't recommend highly enough that the fluid is, Martina Schroeder, who actually formulated the fluid, is 7 times award winner from the Absolute Sounds magazine. And these guys don't just say these things for nothing. They're not the only people. A lot of people who've heard L'Art du Son don't use anything else. So that's the first recommendation. The next one is in terms of a machine, to weigh up what you can live with. There is a certain convenience about using something like the Loricraft machine. If you weigh that up in the context of your vinyl collection, how valuable your vinyl collection is to you, and also factor in the fact that you're going to get improved sound quality, plus extend the life of your cartridge by maybe up to 6 times. In other words, instead of a £1,000 cartridge lasting a year, it could last 6 years. And that makes these things seem a really good investment. Certainly in terms of your record collection alone, I know the cost of replacing worn records, and it soon adds up. Some records are of course completely irreplaceable, so it's a worthwhile investment. And I think that one of the biggest discoveries for me this year has actually been how important cleaning records is. I've got worn records which have been completely rejuvenated just by cleaning with a decent record cleaning machine and L'Art du Son. I found the difference quite staggering, and it worries me, quite frankly, that there are a lot of vinyl people out there who may not be cleaning their records properly. And if I was an anti-vinyl person, I'd say the best recommendation I could give to turn people off vinyl is don't clean your records, or clean them with the wrong fluid, because it just really does make a big difference. I've listened recently to the difference between a £500 cartridge and a £2,500 cartridge. The difference was really significant, and I thought, wow, what a cartridge. But if it came down to would I rather have the £2,500 cartridge or clean my records, which would be the bigger difference, I'd say probably about equal. It really is that big on even a half decent system. Now, I will probably be quite heavily criticised by this, by people who haven't tried this thing or have got systems that just don't add up. I don't know, but anyway, for what it's worth, for those of you who love vinyl, who really want to get the best from the records, this is something I would strongly recommend. And my credibility is at stake. I don't like recommending complete nonsense, so give it a try. It's worth the risk. Okay, I'd just like to say that all the products we've talked about on these videos are available online at www.originlive.com, with the exception of the Keith Monk's machine, which is only available by collection. If you already have a cleaning machine, then a great place we'd recommend you start is the L'Art du Son cleaning fluid, because that really does make a difference. So thank you very much for watching these videos. We hope you've enjoyed them and that you'll get some great results from cleaning your records. Thank you.